That chessboard on my table was about to change my life forever. My name's Austin Reed. I'm 22, and I've always been the kid any conservative dad in Minnesota would dream of having. I was dedicated to my studies, responsible, and always followed the path set out for me since day one. My routine in Boston, where I study business administration, was as predictable as the moves I'd been making in chess since I was 7. Between financial spreadsheets and market strategies, my life was all about meeting expectations. My few childhood friends, weekly phone calls with my parents, and online chess games perfectly filled my organized days. That was until an administrative mistake at the university brought the piece into my dorm room that would scramble my whole board and make me question every move I'd made so far. If you've ever lived your whole life in the white squares, you're gonna get exactly what I mean. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to get access to more stories like this. The third-floor dorm is my refuge. From the big window, I watch the campus covered in autumn leaves while I plan out my day. The light walls only show a family photo and my certificate from the last chess tournament. I wake up at 6, do some workouts, classes in the morning, and hit the library in the afternoon. At night, between one financial problem and the next, I allow myself a few online matches. The quiet in my room is only broken by the hum of the heater and the clacking of my laptop keyboard. Every day it's the same sequence of moves, like a king never leaving its safe zone. I was deep into a complex spreadsheet when the door swung open. A British accent invaded my carefully calculated space. "You must be Austin, right?" I looked up from my laptop and found Marcus Bennett, 23, with messy dark hair and a smile that seemed to poke fun at my confused expression. He explained about the administration's mistake that made him my new roommate. As he talked, he began spreading his stuff around the empty space. British literature books piled up on the desk opposite mine. Casual clothes filled the previously empty closet, and a Queen's Park Rangers poster, a soccer team I'd never even heard of, found a spot on the wall. The invasion of my organized territory should have annoyed me, but something about the way he moved, so natural and chill, intrigued me. Marcus grabbed my chessboard from the shelf, studying the pieces with curiosity. "Do you play?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant. "Terribly bad," he replied, laughing. "But I've always wanted to really learn. In England, I used to watch players at Hyde Park. His presence was like a misplaced piece on my perfectly arranged board. While I kept everything meticulously organized, he seemed totally at ease in the chaos. His books were littered with colorful sticky notes all over the place, and his backpack looked like it was about to burst with more stuff. "I can teach you if you want," I found myself saying, surprising even me with the offer. Marcus smiled in a way that stirred something inside me. "That'd be awesome. How about we start tonight?" I nodded, quickly shifting my eyes back to my spreadsheet, trying to ignore how that smile had momentarily muddled my thoughts. For the first time in years, my programmed routine was about to get an unpredictable twist. While he kept sorting his things out, humming a song I didn't know, I realized that my controlled space was about to transform into something completely different. And the strangest part was, a part of me was oddly excited about that change. Thursdays turned into our ritual. Marcus proved to be a dedicated chess student, even if his moves were as unpredictable as he was. While I explained basic strategies, he countered with literary quotes that, surprisingly, made sense. "Chess is like a Jane Austen novel," he'd say, moving his knight in an unorthodox way. "Every piece has its role, but it's the unexpected moves that make the story interesting." In exchange for the chess lessons, Marcus started introducing me to British literature. His passionate analyses of Shakespeare and Wilde brought a perspective I'd never found in my business books. Our nights extended well past the board. I discovered he had a unique talent for turning instant noodles into something that looked like it came from a fancy restaurant, adding ingredients I'd never even consider. Meanwhile, I helped him organize his chaotic finances with simple spreadsheets. "How do you see patterns in numbers so easily?" he'd ask, leaning over my shoulder to check out my Excel formulas. His subtle cologne mixed with the Earl Grey he always drank distracted me for a moment. Cultural differences sparked endless conversations. He'd laugh at my pronunciation when I tried to mimic British slang, and I'd tease him about his inability to grasp American football rules. "That shouldn't even be called football," he'd protest, as I tried to explain the basic plays. Our routine naturally fell into place. Mornings started with him making tea for both of us while I organized our schedules for the day. Evenings ended with chess matches or long discussions about books and numbers that stretched late into the night. It was strange how someone so different from me could fit so perfectly into my structured life. Carter showed up unannounced on a Sunday. My childhood friend, the one I'd always shared chess tournament wins with back in Minnesota, was now watching me with a different look. During his visit, I noticed his eyes following every interaction between Marcus and me. "You've changed, Austin," Carter said before leaving. "I've never seen you smile like that." Those words sparked thoughts I'd been trying to ignore. I started noticing how my heart raced when Marcus came over to check out my chess moves, how I looked for any excuse to extend our late-night chats, how his smile had become my favorite part of the day. Weekly calls with my conservative family turned into exercises in evasion. My sister Riley would pick up on a different, more distant tone in my voice. "You okay?" she'd ask, and I'd switch the subject. For the first time, the kid who'd always known exactly his place in the world felt lost. Every move took me to unknown territory, and the fear of checkmate kept me up at night. The night of the regional chess championship was supposed to be my moment of triumph. Marcus was in the front row, backing me up like he promised. But my focus was off. Earlier, my parents had called saying they'd pay a surprise visit over the weekend. During the final match, my eyes kept toggling between the board and Marcus. His encouraging smile, the same that had lit up so many study nights, now sent a whirlwind of conflicting emotions through me. I lost important pieces with careless moves, leaving my king vulnerable. That's when it hit me. I was playing the way I'd always played my life, defensively, afraid to take risks. The opponent advanced while I kept retreating. I protected my king, but sacrificed all my other important pieces. Marcus must have noticed how anxious I was. During the break, he found me in the empty corridor. "Austin, what's going on?" "I can't do this," I whispered, my hands shaking. "My parents are coming in 3 days. They'll notice. Everybody will notice." "Notice what?" His voice was soft, but his eyes challenged me to finally speak it out loud. The words got stuck in my throat. Years of expectations, paths drawn by others, were suffocating me. Marcus stepped forward, closing the gap between us. Sometimes, the bravest move is risking everything for something that really matters. In that moment, like making a decisive move in chess, everything became clear. I'd spent my whole life playing by everyone else's rules, only moving in safe spaces. I went back to the game, transformed. For the first time, I wasn't playing to meet expectations, but for myself. Every move was a statement of who I really was. I sacrificed pieces I'd once held as essential, let go of defenses that kept me trapped. My opponent didn't expect that change of strategy. In just a few moves, the game turned. When I finally announced checkmate, it wasn't just a game I was winning. It was my own fear. Marcus was waiting for me at the auditorium exit. Without a second thought, without calculating consequences like I always did, I kissed him right there, under the fluorescent lights in the corridor. His lips tasted of Earl Grey and endless possibilities. We pulled apart when we heard footsteps. It was Carter. His face showed surprise, then understanding, and finally a subtle smile. "So that was it," he said simply, before leaving us alone again. "And now?" Marcus asked, his fingers interlaced with mine. "Now," I replied, feeling a confidence I'd never experienced before. "We play the game our way." The championship trophy weighed in my backpack, but I felt lighter than ever. In 3 days, I'd face the toughest match of my life with my parents. But for the first time, I wasn't playing to defend, I was playing to live. The night after the championship, our room felt different. The soft light from the bedside lamp created dancing shadows on the walls, and the silence carried a new weight, full of unspoken promises. Marcus put on his favorite David Bowie vinyl, turned down just enough that it was barely more than a background murmur. "So you're the famous regional tournament winner, huh?" he joked, as he came closer while I shelved the trophy. His smile mixed pride with something deeper, more intense. "Thanks to my British literature professor," I replied, feeling my heart quicken when he touched my face. His fingers were warm against my skin, and I realized I was trembling a little. "You're nervous," he observed, not as a question, but as a tender remark. "The great strategist, finally without a plan?" I chuckled softly, resting my forehead against his. "For the first time, I don't want to plan anything. I don't want to calculate. I just want to—" He interrupted with a kiss, different from the one we'd shared in the tournament corridor. That one had been urgent, a declaration to the world. This one was slow, exploratory, like we had all the time in the universe. His hands slid along my back, and I allowed myself to sink into the feeling of being completely in the moment. The familiar scent of his cologne mixed with tea, the warmth of his body against mine, the soft sound of his breathing. Each detail was etched in my memory. Between kisses and hesitant touches, Marcus murmured verses from romantic poets into my ear, making me laugh and shiver all at once. "Do you really have to quote Keats right now?" "Absolutely," he replied, his eyes sparkling with fun and desire. "Poetry is made for moments like this." Our clothes were slowly discarded, each new inch of exposed skin explored with an almost religious devotion. Marcus kissed every freckle on my shoulder as if mapping out constellations, while I traced the lines of his collarbone with trembling fingers. Time seemed to flow differently, like in a dream. The music had long stopped, leaving only the sound of our breathing and occasional sighs whenever we hit a particularly sensitive spot. "You're beautiful," he whispered against my skin, and for the first time in my life, I truly believed those words. We moved together like an impromptu dance, discovering rhythms and patterns our bodies created naturally. Every touch, every kiss was a new revelation. My hands, always so precise on the chessboard, now trembled as they explored his body. Marcus guided me gently through every moment of hesitation, every instant of vulnerability. "It's okay," he murmured. "I'm here with you." When we finally became one, it was as if all the pieces on the board finally fell into their right places. The pleasure built in ever more intense waves until there was no room for thoughts, only sensations. At the climax, I buried my face in his neck, feeling his heart beat against mine. For a moment, it was just the two of us, suspended in time and space, completely connected. Afterward, lying in each other's arms, Marcus traced lazy patterns on my skin while I played with his disheveled hair. The silence was comfortable, full of unspoken promises, yet deeply felt. Saturday dawned with a fine autumn rain. Marcus slept soundly next to me, his arm possessively around my waist. The peace of the moment was interrupted by the doorbell. My heart stopped. My parents had always been punctual. It was a trait I'd inherited from them. The clock read 9 p.m. "Marcus," I whispered, gently shaking him. "They're here." He slowly opened his eyes, understanding the situation. In seconds, we were dressing in a hurry, trying to tidy up the room that still held traces of last night. The doorbell rang again. "I can go out," Marcus offered, his voice betraying his worry. "I'll be back later." "No," I replied firmly, surprising both of us. "No more hiding." We went downstairs together. Every step felt like it was leading me closer to an inevitable moment. I opened the door to find my parents, my dad in his usual moss green sweater, my mom holding a homemade apple pie. "Austin!" my mom exclaimed, hugging me. Then she noticed Marcus. "Oh, you must be the British roommate. We've heard so much about you." My dad's gaze shifted between us, and I could see the exact moment he realized. 30 years of working with data analysis had made him an expert at spotting patterns. "Can we come in?" he asked in a controlled tone. In the living room, the silence was heavy. Marcus sat next to me on the couch, our close proximity an unspoken declaration. "The championship trophy," my dad noted as he looked at the shelf. "Congratulations." "Thanks," I replied. "Actually, Marcus helped me a lot with that. Austin," my dad interrupted. "What's going on here?" I felt Marcus's hand subtly find mine. I took a deep breath. "Mom, Dad, Marcus isn't just my roommate, My voice wavered a little. "He's my boyfriend." The sound of rain against the windows filled the silence that followed. My mom put her hand to her mouth, and my dad abruptly got up and walked over to the window. "For how long?" he asked, with his back to us. "Officially, since yesterday, but I think I've known since he arrived." My dad turned around, his eyes meeting mine. "And the plan? Stanford, MBA, the company?" "I can still do all that," I replied. "But now I'll do it as who I really am." Marcus squeezed my hand gently, giving me strength. My mom finally spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "Are you happy?" "More than ever." She stood up and walked over to us. To my surprise, she hugged Marcus first, then me. "That's what matters." My dad stayed silent a few more moments, then sighed deeply. "It's going to be an adjustment. I need time." "I know," I answered. "I just ask you to try and get to know Marcus. He's extraordinary." The hours that followed were strange, tense, but also unexpectedly honest. Marcus charmed my mom with his stories about British literature, and even my dad smiled when he described how he taught me to appreciate tea. When they left, I promised to call later. In the farewell hug, my dad whispered, "I'm still proud of you, son." At the door, watching the car drive away, Marcus hugged me from behind. "You were amazing." "We were," I corrected, turning to kiss him. The rain had stopped, and a ray of sunshine broke through the clouds. The semester was coming to an end, and with it, Marcus's official exchange period. An envelope from the University of London arrived on a Tuesday, offering him a prestigious spot in the PhD program in literature. Sitting in our favorite cafe, the envelope on the table between us felt like it weighed a ton. "This is an incredible opportunity," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's what you've always dreamed of." Marcus twirled his teacup, watching the leaves settling at the bottom as if they could reveal the future. "There are also some great programs here," he replied. "The University of Minnesota has a pretty respected literature department." "But it's not London," I argued. "It's not your dream." He reached across the table, interlacing his fingers with mine. "My dreams have changed over the last few months, Austin." The barista announced that the cafe was closing. It was our cue for our last chess game of the night. On the way home, snow began to fall gently, turning Minneapolis into a postcard scene. At home, I set up the chessboard, while Marcus put water on to boil. Our routine, now so familiar, felt even more precious, knowing it might be ending. "Check," I announced after a few moves. Marcus smiled, moving his king. "You know, there's a third option we haven't considered." "Which one?" "You could come with me." I paused, my hand frozen over the board. "To London?" "Stanford has an exchange program with the London School of Economics," he explained, clearly having done his homework. "You could do your MBA over there. Then there are plenty of international companies that—" "Marcus," I interrupted. "My life is here. My family is finally accepting both of us. I've got my plans." "Plans can change," he argued gently. "You taught me that." I stood up and walked over to the window. The snow kept falling, each flake following its own path to the ground. Marcus wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. "I'm not asking for an answer right now," he murmured. "I'm just asking you to consider it. We could build something new, together." I turned in his arms, studying the face that had become so dear to me. "And if it doesn't work out? And if it does?" He smiled. "Is the great strategist really afraid to take a risk? With you? Always." I chuckled softly. "You're the variable that scrambled all my equations." We returned to the game, but my mind was somewhere else. I pictured foggy mornings in London, afternoons in century-old libraries, nights exploring an ancient city with someone who made everything feel like an adventure. "Checkmate," Marcus announced. I looked at the board, surprised. He'd beaten me for the first time. "How?" "Sometimes the boldest move is the surest one," he explained, his eyes shining. That night, lying in our bed, I made my decision. Yes. "I'm going to request a transfer tomorrow," I said, "but with one condition." "Which?" "You have to promise me you'll teach me how to make a decent cup of tea. I can't embarrass you in England." His laughter filled the room, followed by a kiss that promised thousands of future adventures. Outside, the snow kept falling, each flake tracing its own unique path until it found its place. Just like us, I thought. Sometimes you just have to let the wind guide you to where you really belong. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to get access to more stories like this. 3 years later, I'm looking out at London from our little apartment in Notting Hill. Marcus is in the kitchen, getting our morning Earl Grey ritual ready, while I set up the chess pieces for our daily game. The chessboard that's been with us since Minneapolis occupies a place of honor on our table. Its pieces, worn out by constant use, carry the stories of hundreds of games, conversations, and important decisions. I've learned that life, just like chess, isn't only about strategy and precise calculations. Sometimes, the most important moves are the ones you make with your heart, even when they seem illogical on paper. Marcus comes over with our teacups, his engagement ring softly glinting. A surprise I planned during a walk in Hyde Park a couple of months ago. "Deep in thought, love." "About how sometimes we need to tear down our own defenses to truly live," I reply, moving the first pawn. My family visits us regularly now. My dad, who needed time to accept it at first, now jokes about having a son-in-law who finally appreciates classic literature. My mom is already planning the wedding, even though we haven't set a date yet. The London School of Economics taught me a lot about global business, but it was Marcus who taught me about courage. Courage to love openly, to change plans, to build an authentic life. I still play competitive chess on weekends, but now each win tastes different. It's no longer about proving something to someone. It's about the pure joy of the game. "Check," Marcus announces, drawing me back to the present. I study the board, seeing endless possibilities unfold. Years ago, I would have chosen the safest, most predictable move. Today, I smile and make a daring move that risks it all. Because I've learned that true checkmate isn't on the board. It's in the courage to live authentically, love completely, and risk everything for what really matters. And to you, dear reader, who's made it this far, what's your next move? Life is your board, and the pieces are all in place. Sometimes the bravest move is just to start the game. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to get access to more stories like this.